This is going to be a very informal panel. I'll take a minute to introduce myself and my guest. I'm Meldrina Chapin. I am sort of the wife of the GGTA. My husband is Andrew Greenberg, and I am not a game designer. Never was a game designer, never wanted to be a game designer, but I have learned a lot about games in the past 20 years, knowing Andrew and all of his friends. And I've actually brought some of his friends here with me this afternoon. I have Wes Wilson, Ian Schreiber, and Stephen Richards. So tell us a little bit about yourselves.
I have been around gaming for most of my life. I was a huge role player and board gamer, and I collected tons and tons of games, just waiting for that time where my children would be old enough to play games with me. And now that they are, in a lot of ways, they don't. And I think one of the biggest things I'm going to be able to offer here is how all the things I love about games, my kids could care less about.
Ian Schreiber. I've been playing games pretty much my whole life. This was primarily the bonding activity of choice in my household growing up. So this was when I interacted with my parents. It was through games. And when my parents were busy and I wasn't interacting with them, then I was playing games on my console. So games kind of are a very formative part of who I am. And I have 3 kids, 7, 5, and 2. So the older ones are definitely playing games. The youngest is at the point where he can at least touch an iPad and cause things to happen, sometimes unintentional things. I am a game designer. I've been doing game design since the year 2000. I've never actually worked on children's games, but I have observed my children play. They all play games. They all play in very different ways, and I've seen things.
All right. And I'm Stephen Richards, lifelong gamer. And yes, like Wes, I went through a phase where I was patiently waiting for the kids to get old enough that we could play this game and this other game, right? In my day job, I also do Lean Six Sigma quality improvement and consulting in healthcare, where we're concerned with behavioral economics and how you change the motivational level of people you're interacting with. And a lot of that crosswalks with gaming, right? Being able to gamify a system is an important set of mechanics to keep in mind, whether you're doing design or more practical application.
So here at the table, we have parents of everything from 2 to 3-year-olds all the way up to teenagers. Wes and Stephen have teenagers now. And I'd like to take a few minutes and talk about some games that I like for the really younger set. And you guys feel free to chime in. I figure we'll get about 10, 15 minutes each to talk about what we like for a particular age range of children. So I brought a stack of games. Unfortunately, I know none of the developers of any of these games, so I don't have any local games I don't think that I can show you. But what I brought were some games that are really geared towards young children. So this game is called Zimbos. And I should say who it's by. Blue Orange, Hot Games, Cool Planet. And it's for ages 3 and up. And basically, it's a bunch of elephants that you stack up. My daughter could care less about the rules of this game, but she loves to stack these elephants. She loves to count these elephants. She likes to tell me the colors on these elephants. Well worth whatever money we spent to buy this game. Because I think especially when you're talking about 2 and 3-year-olds, you need to get them involved and being sort of interested in the game. Remember, they're really small, they're really young, they have a very short attention span. It's about this big. So anything that sort of draws their attention is great. This is a fun game called Stack Up. It is by Peaceable Kingdom. This is a really good company. It says ages 3+. One of the cool things about Stack Up is they have these little blocks and they have little holes in them. And the idea, actually, with the game is that you're supposed to be able to work with a friend. Could you help me pick up the... So we can pick them up together like this. Ooh. Ooh. Or we can use the soft squishy end and pick them up together like
There is a general principle that any really good children's game also makes a great adult drinking game. I think this is a perfect representation of that.
But this is a really durable game, but it also works really well working on their dexterity, because remember, very small children are still trying to figure out what is this thing with 5 things on the end of it and what can I do with it, and the idea of eye-hand coordination is kind of lost. My daughter still does not know how to do this game as a teen, but she likes to try it. And the thing that I like about it is that it can fall on the floor. It doesn't matter. The pieces are big. They're not going to go into my vacuum cleaner. Very key, important part. Now, speaking of vacuum cleaner pieces, the Sneaky Snacky Squirrel game, made by Educational Insights for ages 3+, does have a cute little squirrel. He's like a pair of tweezers, and he picks up these little guys, which we have fished out of the vacuum cleaner before. This is actually pretty hard for my daughter to do. She doesn't have a lot of strength yet. So we usually set the squirrel in the middle, and the squirrel gets to chomp around and, look at things. But she gets the idea that you're supposed to spin the spinner and get a different color and put it on the color, on your little log. So she likes that one. But I'll tell you what she really likes to do with this. She really likes to put the little nuts in here and then feed you tea at her tea party.
Yes.
So you need games that they can do all kinds of things with. Like, you want something that's sort of general enough that you can think about, hey, what can they do with this? What can they do with that?
That's one of the hardest lessons I had to learn with kids is they don't care about the rules. They don't. I think if you want to design a really good game for kids, it should consist of a bunch of pieces that can be used to do other things. I found it myself very frustrated the first time I tried to play even kids games with some of my children, because I'm like, these are the rules. This is how you play. We're going to do this together. And it devolved into something else. And it takes I thought I was going to be a much cooler parent. I really did. I thought I was going to be much more easygoing, and I'd be like, but look, we need to, like, I started getting frustrated because I wanted my children to do the game the way it was designed, and it's not always that way. So yes, pieces that do other things are good stuff.
And they're going to play the game the way they want to play it. Yep. And so if you're going to have a rule set, it needs to be really, really simple. This is a game that has a really, really simple rule set. It's called Match and Dance Memory Game. And it is for 3-year-olds, 3+. And let's see here if I can quickly give you the gist of the game. You have matching cards with their pictures on them, right? And so you match 2 Angelinas to each other. And when you find 2 Angelinas, you get to put a token on the card. Well, the token on the card is either first position, second position, third, fourth, or fifth position. If you're familiar with ballet, these are classical ballet poses. Well, my daughter has decided that that's not the way you play the game. You're supposed to match a card, get a token, and then you have to do that position.
Yep.
That's not the way she plays this game. The way she plays this game is that you have to pick a card, and when you pick a card, that means that somebody else can become that person. And so if I picked a card, maybe Stephen became Angelina, and she would get a token, and she would put the token down, and she would say, Stephen, you have to do 4th position.
I should stretch more.
I was going to say, luckily there's a little guide here. There's a picture that shows you how to do it. So this is one of those games, Wes, that you would have been very upset about, because she's not playing it by the rules. But she plays it the way she wants to play it, which is okay with us.
if any of you have cats, you know the horror of bringing home a cat toy and then the cat just wants to play with the box. Kids are kind of like that too.
Yeah, they are quite like that. I do like that this game has some physical activity in it. Another one that I like is called I Can Do That. It's a Dr. Seuss game, and all it says, oh, no, there it is, Wonder Forge. Sorry, I was going to say, surely we can't credit Dr. Seuss with this. But what I like about this one is that you lay all the cards out, and then you're supposed to pick 3 of a color. So you get a red one, a green one, and a blue one. And they go in steps, 1, 2, 3. And this says tiptoe. So we have picked a tiptoe. If it's your turn, Wes, you have to tiptoe. 2, around a chair. 3, with the fish under your right arm. Here's your fish. Are you ready to tiptoe around your chair with the fish under your right arm? This is really fun. Like, it gets them moving, which is another thing. Really small children don't sit very still, and so it gets them out and doing something physically. This does have some impossible things. My 3-year-old can't crab walk yet. There was something that, I can't remember which, I think there's a place. Oh, so to the refrigerator. Well, if you're camping, that you can't go to the refrigerator. So sometimes we have to substitute something else for it.
I'm not sure how many 3-year-olds can read either.
Yeah, they can't read, so you have to help them. Pictures are really, really important if you're designing for a small age group. It's really, really important. The last one I'll talk about, I think I really like this one by I Can Do That. It's called Richard Scarry's Busy Town. And it's officially for 3 and up. And so it's a huge game board. It's 7, 8 feet long. You have to put it in the board. And the reason why I like this game is it has multiple steps to it. So the way we first started playing this game is we just let her have the board and have the little pieces. There's 4 little pieces, movers in it. And she just took them around the town and talked about what they were doing. There was really no gameplay in it. It was more imaginary. And she was 2-ish at this time. And then we moved into now you can actually spin the spinner, which, by the way, your spinner needs to be kind of thick and big and, let them get their fingers on it. Because they can't do any of this yet. They're doing this. And so it really goes around, doesn't it? Sorry, busy town people. But she finally did learn how to spin the spinner. And so the first way we played this game was we would just use the numbers, and she just moves the people, and we each took a turn. And then she got used to doing that for a while. And then the second thing that we did was we started, the spin again or the spin again kind of thing. And the last piece we put on it was this little part where you use your fake magnifying glass to find certain things. Pick up a card, like a hose, and if you look on, watch, I won't have a hose here at all. But anyway, you're supposed to find the little things in the, image of the board. I don't see a hose, but maybe I could get a traffic light, and you get to find the traffic light. So I liked this game because we could stage it for her. So over a whole year and a half, we finally got to the point where we were looking for the things. And now as parents, we'll be trying to figure out what can the next stage can be that we can add to it. So we also need to think about, in designing for kids, sort of how will that game grow with them as their abilities grow, or how do you make it different if you've got older kids versus younger kids? Is there something that the younger kids can do that the older kids don't get to do?
So clearly there's a market opportunity for a legacy game where you start placing stickers and new rules on things on the kid's birthday, going up multiple years.
Oh, that'd be a great idea. That'd be fantastic.
But Busy Town in particular was troublesome for my kids because there was some age difference there, and this is a skill-based game. And that's something else to consider. If you want a parent to play with multiple kids and it's a skill-based game at this young age, there's going to be a vast difference. Even a moderate span between your kids is going to, that's a hunt tiny things on a board thing. And the difference between a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old doing that is huge. And that game in particular was a little frustrating for me to play with multiple kids. With one kid, it was great. With multiple kids, it was not a good choice.
I can see how that could be, because we just have one child. We're usually playing all together. She's between the ages of 2 and 3, they do what's called parallel play. So I would be playing kitchen, and Wes would be standing right beside me playing kitchen, but we're really not playing kitchen together. It's not until we get 4 and 5 that I'm like, hey, Wes, hand me the sugar and put it in the bowl with me because we need to make pancakes. And Wes would help me out with that. So you also need to think about at that very, very young age that they're not going to interact with each other as much. Whereas by the time you get 5, 6, and 7, now you can start doing stuff in teams or cooperating.
And you've also got, with that game and skill things, you get kids facing not winning.
Yes. That's a biggie.
And so if you've got a skill-based game and there's a winner of the game, or even some way to demonstrably prove that one child is superior to the other in the game. Yeah. For instance, in that one, if one child puts down 5 little things and the other one puts down 1, there's an ego difference there that's going to be reflective negatively in the experience for the younger child.
Yeah, and actually that might be a good segue into some of the ways that games address those problems, right?
Yeah.
So to lead into this, game mechanics that drive us insane as parents, right? So length and randomness, and particularly when randomness increases length. Right. So I'll give you an example. Sorry, right? So in the game Sorry, you start out with 4 pieces at your home, and at first it's all cool. You're drawing your number cards, but you have to draw 1 or 2 particular number cards to get out of home, right? And then you're driving around the board. You might get sent home by another player. It's like, why did you send me home? And the conflict.
Sorry.
And, right? Sorry. Yeah. Learn to deal with disappointment. But the thing is, when you get to the end of the game, the way that you finish is by drawing the exact number value card necessary to get that last piece into home. And so every turn, there's no skill, there's no strategy, there's no tactics, there's not even a bell curve. You're just drawing a card off a stack, and you're sitting there. It's like the baton death march. It's like, when is this going to be over? So don't do that.
Well, I mean, I think this is actually a really common thing with the same way that every multiplayer co-op game has to deal with the alpha gamer problem, right? Every roll and move children's game has to deal with the problem of what if there's a broad spread where someone is way ahead of someone else, so that the person who's behind doesn't feel like it's hopeless, and they all have to deal with that. And the 2 ways I've seen to deal with that are like the Sorry or Chutes and Ladders version, where it's like you have to end by exact count, so you could be 1 space away and be there for half of the game while someone else eventually can catch up to you. Or there's the Candyland version where you can overshoot the final space just fine, but every now and then you'll draw that card or spin that spinner or whatever that will send you back. Yeah. So there's always that chance that the person in the lead will not win. So you need to address that somehow, so that the player, because if you think that little kids don't like being on the losing end of a game, they really don't like being on the losing end for most of the game, knowing that it's hopeless any more than adults do.
Yeah.
Well,
I was going to say, and you need to think about the consequences of disappointment for a child.
Yep.
If you're talking about a 2 or 3-year-old, you're literally talking about yelling and screaming and kicking in the floor and driving mom and dad nuts, possibly for hours.
Yes.
So I think it's very, very difficult to design games for children when you don't know what kind of child is going to be playing it. You know, like, is it the child that really, really gets upset? Is it a child that's very mercurial like mine that will get upset for 2 seconds and then go, ooh, bright, shiny, furry kitty cat, and she's fine. But some of that can be really hard. And yes, we do need to learn how to deal with disappointment, but
Right.
There's a time and place.
Yeah, exactly.
when
not
and
well,
where
right.
and how.
And,
Right.
and this actually points to a general design principle when designing kids for games. This is true for video games as well as board games. Playtest with a variety of kids. Like, you are not your target audience. Whenever you are not your target audience, you need to playtest with your target audience, and this goes double for kids because you are not in that headspace. You may think you are, but until you actually see your game being played by kids and they play it in completely different ways than you ever imagined, you really have no idea. I do this exercise with my graduate students. They think they're all hot crap with game design, and it's like, oh, I know how to do this. And I'm like, yeah, you're going to make a game for little kids. My kids are going to grade your projects. You'd better play test this. They never play test it. My kids come in, and the very first thing they do is get stuck on something that seems obvious to an adult, but to a 5-year-old is like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what you're doing. They will put text on the screen that's like way above reading level, and it's like, it's clear that you did not even try to put this in front of a kid, did you? And they learn a very valuable lesson that day. Not my kids, the grad students. My kids learned that adults cannot design games for kids to save their lives. That's also a valuable lesson.
So I know that like whenever you're creating a game, a lot of times you say your target audience, like most of it is 3+. So would you say that it's a good idea to kind of test like from the base of what I really want to be a 3+ game to start at 3 and to kind of figure out where the ceiling really is there, or really just keep on testing it once and just see how it works with them? Like,
there's going to be a very wide range. Even if you say, like, this game is for, like, a very narrow range. Like, this game is for 4-year-olds. Like, there's a massive gulf in ability level between different 4-year-olds. Like,
Well, let's also talk 1 minute about why these say 3 and up.
Yes.
So, this is not because this is geared for the development of a 3-year-old.
Small pieces,
This
choking
is
hazard.
geared for a 3-year-old because if a 2-year-old or a 1-year-old starts to put these things in their mouth, they could be a choking hazard. So their 3 and up tag on a lot of these is really about the legality of don't let your small child put these things in your mouth.
Yes.
Not getting sued.
Not getting sued.
Right. Also,
Now,
Yep.
granted, some of them might be about, yeah, we think this would be interesting to a 3-year-old, but a lot of it is about that it's got small parts.
Yep.
And you do want to think about those small parts, not just can the acorns get in the vacuum cleaner, but you guys remember, is it 1.5 inches around?
probably depends on the vacuum. I don't know.
Well, there is a dimension
Okay. I didn't know.
that of a ball that you have to make it bigger than that for it not to go down a child's
Okay.
throat.
Oh, that. Okay.
And I think it's 1.5 inches. I'm not sure. You can look it up. Please do. We're not legal advisors. But and the other thing that I've noticed that's weird is even some card games have it on it. So I don't know whether it has to do with that they can chew the cards and the cardboard pieces come apart.
I can talk about that.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, so I wanted to add 2 things to that. Number one is if you ever intend to sell your game in the EU, they have different regulations than we do in the US, and one of the things that they pay attention to is what's called child-safe testing, because it's not just about choking hazard, it's also about, there are a lot of these things are made in, in China, in Beijing, in other places, where, these things are toxic. Some cards are made with lead in them, and if your child chews on them, they can get lead poisoning from that. And so there are, and so you can say, oh yes, we use lead-safe ink, we use lead-free inks, but in certain countries, you can't just claim that. You need to prove it. You need to actually have a third party verify this. That's extra cost for manufacturing. It's something that if you just are used to making games through GameCrafter or AdMagic or something, and print and play, that's something that they will do, but you have to ask for it, and you will have to pay for it, and it's a fair chunk of change. It's not something that you want to do for just like a print run of 10 of these. The other thing that I wanted to mention about the age range, because not all of them are 3 and up. Some of them are 8 and up or 10 and up, and something you might wonder like what's the difference? Like, are there regulations for like all these different age ranges? And the answer is no. It's totally arbitrary on the publisher to say like, oh, this seems like an 8 and up. It's they basically say what they want. For once you're above 3, 3 is the legal one. And then 13 and above in the EU is the cutoff for when you don't have to do child safe testing. But anything in between that range is just a publisher saying, yeah, we think this is about at this development level.
Yeah, I was going to say, based on some puzzle manufacturers, my daughter's functioning at a 5 to 7-year-old level, which I'm really impressed about.
Well, and to circle back to some of the play testing components of your question, one of the other key things to look at is, can this game be played in an unexpected way where the child is still having fun with the game, which is the whole point, right? And can this game be played as a team with an older sibling or a parent in a way that still allows the child to make meaningful decisions, right? Because what really grips kids during those developing ages is being able to make a decision or take an action that has an observable impact, right? It's like, I did this and that happened. So, looking at ways to play a game together, and what does the age range for that look like? And is the parent going to be able to do it and enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
But that brings me to, so this is Flapdoodle. It is by Wig City Bang Games, and it is for 6 and up. And they made it very, very simple. So the wrapper here is, look, I've got a board, and we're all these weird characters, and we're going through, I don't know, a candy factory, right? And stuff just happens. And so there's these silly cards where you arbitrarily move up or back. It's like, make up a sentence that makes sense before the timer runs out. You must use each of these words. Pretzel, traffic, gorilla, bowling, flippers, right? And so my kids love it. And in spite of the age gap, they can, they both enjoy it. I mean, the older one kind of plays along, right? But it's like, let's play this game where we all act silly together.
Yeah.
And, there's no mechanics to get hung up on. Dad doesn't get upset.
But that also sounds like one that would be fun to help somebody with. So, like, I don't remember all the words, but my daughter's not 6, but, that might be challenging for a 6-year-old to use all those words. So if a parent started the sentence, could the child then finish it? Or can you say, tell me what the gorilla did with the balloon or whatever?
Right. And, I mean, I think another solution to the who's going to win this thing problem is co-op gaming in which you are competing against the environment. And I can talk about 2 principles at once with this. So you've got Forbidden Island, right, which leads to Pandemic. And so this is a more streamlined and simplified set of the same game mechanics that level up to Pandemic, which in turn levels up to something like Pandemic Legacy or the expansions. And so as a gamer who's raising kids who game, one of the things I really appreciate is that, we can play this and enjoy it, and it helps teach them transferable gaming skills and right, how to evaluate risk, how to work as a team, right? I don't know, Wes, have you played this one?
Oh, yeah. No, I own that one. That's a good one.
And what age range would you say that your kids started with these?
Well, and this is the funny thing, right? This is ages 10 and up.
Not if a parent is playing along and telling the kid what to do.
Right. You can, again, there's a number of moves where the kid can just do whatever, and it's not going to break the game. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'll go.
So did you start with yours, Ian, about what age?
Yeah, I'd say probably. My kids are my oldest is very precocious, but I'd say she started with these types of games around 5 or 6 or so. We started with Castle Panic, and that was a fantastic one too. It's very relatively simple rules. There's almost no text on the cards. There's a few cards that have text, The other thing that I appreciate about some of these is that it allows the parent to do some scaffolding. So, for example, in Forbidden Island and Pandemic both, I think it's you have a hand of cards, and you're supposed to keep those cards concealed. But you can totally play with an open hand and help the kid out. Where if the kid's stuck or doesn't know what to do, why didn't you play that one? Okay. Yeah. So normally we think of like the alpha gamer problem of one person who's trying to direct everyone else, and everyone else just kind of sits there and goes with it. Is a lot of times a bad thing in co-op games. But when you're talking about a parent with a much younger kid who doesn't necessarily have all of the cognitive skills to make these decisions on their own, that can actually be a good thing as long as the parent is doing it right and not, as long as the game is still fun for the kid. And that's on the parent to do that. And one thing that I've noticed with a lot of these games is they don't really have any instruction to the parents on how to do this. So it's like, I, as a parent who's also a game designer, know how to play these kinds of games with my kids, how to house rules around things to make things simpler for them. Not everyone does have that.
Right.
So I would say that is a suggestion that I think is underrepresented in these types of games, is have a parent's guide for when you are playing with kids under the minimum age to say, hey, you can make these modifications and it makes this game friendlier.
Yeah, that's a good point, because like even
Yeah.
the way that we altered Busy Town, we just did that, sort of out of common mom and dad sense. There wasn't a little thing in here that said, oh, you could play it these different ways depending on your child's ability. And one of the things that you might want to think about is not saying, if your child is 5, you play it this way, because children do develop at different ages and ranges. And if we start talking about how autistic children play games, that number, is no longer relevant, because you might have somebody that's really, really focused on detailed things, and will do those things for hours, and then you might have somebody that just isn't at all.
Right.
Question? I'm sorry, question?
In terms of learning, like the core loop of the game that we are designing, how important it is, like the education part of it, like how much are we thinking about, okay, the core loop of this particular game is to learn wires. Like, is that a main factor that we look for, or is just for the fun of it?
I think that from my perspective, the learning in the game is incidental. Some of the most useful skills that I would expect kids to pick up from gaming are just how game theory works and how cooperation or negotiation works, trading games, bluffing games. It's like my 14-year-old, when we were on a road trip, looked over at me and said, "Dad, I know all your tells." Like, you'll go far with that. But it's, so there are games like Scrambled States, which is like a geography game where it's, it's really basic, and you might pick up some state names and state capitals, but unless you're marketing to like Tiger Moms, right, where it's like, oh, this is super educational, that might be a way to sell more stuff. But for me personally, it's not a big driver, because the gaming isn't the educational.
I'm also from a generation where educational games were boring.
Yeah.
That's every generation.
Well, I disagree. I disagree.
Some of them are getting better. But
When I look at stuff nowadays, like I see educational games that are designed to be fun first and educational as an incidental or tangential element to that. But when I was a kid, it was, if you want to move forward, tell me what 5 + 6 is,
There are still a lot of games out there that are designed that way, is what I'm saying. We are, some people are getting it, but there's still a lot of really bad stuff out there.
I will say, though, that as for a younger child, like, and we're talking about the 2-3-year-old, like, I like Simbo's, I don't know how well you can see these, but the orange guy's got a 4 on him, and so I could ask my child, what color is this? And we could practice colors. Or I could ask my child, what number is this? And we could practice numbers. But that really doesn't have anything to do with playing the game. Like that was an extra for me. Like the same with Stack Up. I can say, put all the purple blocks together, and she can go get all the purple blocks. But you're at that 2-3-year-old, you're doing that with everything. Like what color are your strawberries? What
do that when
shape is your banana?
And you do that when you're reading too. What red things do you see on this page?
Yeah.
You know?
So there's a lot of like constant learning in whatever you are doing. I wasn't going to talk about video games just because we didn't have time to put everything together and look at them, and they're sort of a different world. But I will say that there are some purpose-driven video games, I'll call them video games, electronic games. Like my daughter really likes Mathlandia, which helps her learn basic counting and numbers and addition, and she can do it in like 14 different languages.
Nice.
And she finds it kind of interesting. And I have no idea who created Mathlandia, so I'm sorry I can't give them any credit. But we have it on tablet.
I would also say keep in mind that learning and education are very different at different age ranges. So this is one of the things that I have to teach my game design students, because they come here thinking like, like Candyland, the game of life, shoots and ladders. Like there's no actual choice here. The game plays itself. Therefore, it's not really a game, and it's beneath our notice as game designers, and it's just a bad game. And what they have to learn is that, for a child who has not learned game skills, like these games do teach things like how to take turns, how to count spaces and move on a board, how to be a gracious winner or loser.
How to spin a spinner.
Right.
Spin
a spinner or roll a die and count pips. Right. These are things that the children for whom these are created, though they do not know that. And so for that age range, these games are very interesting because they are teaching a new skill, even if that skill isn't, strategy. The strategy part comes later after you built these initial skills. And yes, these games are horrible if you're trying to design them for adults, but that's not really the point. So think about what are the capabilities, which again goes back to testing with a variety of kids at your target age range, because you'll see a wide variety of ability levels, and you'll want to figure out kind of where, what range you're going to be shooting for. You also see a wide variety of parents and how they interact with their kids.
We're getting older in the games that you're showing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
while we're
let's
in
come
this
on up.
while we're in this range though, one of the games that my kids have enjoyed and have kind of stuck with is Niagara,
Oh, sure.
which is, you've got interesting movable parts. The basic idea is there's a river, and the game board spaces are discs that you add discs, and it pushes the whole river down, and things follow. So you've got like this cool consequence that's dramatic. You've got movable parts, but you've also got intelligent decisions that can be made based on what's going on there, and yet a very simple rule set for following things. And I think that those kinds of games, like I remember, I loved Mousetrap as a kid. It's a terrible, terrible game, but the fact that there was stuff to do was great, and I feel like that kind of stuff is good. So.
I mean, we have a principle even in video game design of just build the toy first, and when we say that as game designers, we mean get your core mechanics working before there's even a game, because if the core mechanics, the things that players are interacting with constantly on a moment-to-moment basis, that has to be fun and engaging. Otherwise, you can layer everything on top of it, and my moment-to-moment is just boring. But in this case, you can say build the toy first, very literally, that the games for younger kids especially should have a toy component to them.
And games where they make a thing,
right?
This is exciting because these guys stack and move, and you can knock them over and things like that. But you've got one of my favorites down here, and I'm sure I don't fit in the age range of King Dominant.
This one is from also from Blue Orange. It's listed as age 8 and up. You can play.
Oh, 8 and up, good. I do qualify.
15 minutes, right? And that's useful on a number of levels, not just for kids with a short attention span, but sometimes you don't have a full hour, but the kids just want to do something. King Domino, right? And also another vitally important component, how well does this game play with 2 players? Is it 2 or 4?
Yeah.
Or 2, 2, 4, right? It's like if you have a third player, do you have someone who's essentially playing Kingmaker. But in many cases, you have times where it's just me and the kid, and she wants a quick game to play, and it's like, we can get this off the shelf, we can go through a few rounds. It's like, I've got
and by
this little
having
rule
the
book.
time on it, like, do we have time to play this before bed?
We
You know,
do.
like,
Yeah, and it's like, look, that's all it is with the components. It's like, I've got these simple little pieces and these castles, and I've got these cute tiles, and it's like, if I've got a younger kid, they can take the tiles and they can build a little landscape out of them. They don't have to follow the rules, right? Very simple.
There's something worth saying about this.
Oh, sure.
Let me find the. Where is the sea monster? Where's the sea monster?
Sea Monster, right?
Right.
It's a
art,
low-value game.
Right.
The
the art.
piece.
Right. The art direction can make a huge difference in just like little
this,
things to details.
right?
Right. So like you've got this. You probably won't be able to see it on the camera, but yeah, there we go. So like this is just a double field tile, and this is just a double water tile. Those are kind of boring. But then you get like this one that has like the shadow of a dragon flying over it, or this one that has the shadow of a sea monster underneath it. Mechanically, this means nothing. It's just the art, but it has this neat little thing that kind of draws it in, and again, kind of makes gives the kid the opportunity to play with this in a different way. That instead of just playing this as a game, it can be like, oh, this is a cool piece of art. I'm going to tell a story about this, or I'm going to just take these components and play with them and build this thing where it's like, oh, look, there's a sea monster that's attacking this little boat or whatever.
Right.
So it's just.
and that, I would think that would also be something like, ha, I got the sea monster.
Yep.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a real winner on several levels, right? And again, if you think about the production cost element, right? It's nice, tight packaging. They don't have a lot of waste. So when you look, how much does it cost to make this thing? Couple other things. So as long as we're looking at people, well, with two people, the Lord of the Rings, the confrontation. It's essentially a very simplified version of Stratego, right?
Oh, really?
Well, you've got your little, okay, so I've got anonymous pieces. It's like, which member of the company is this? Which minion of Sauron is behind here? And then the board is just a basic grid where you're just trying to get Frodo to Mordor.
Yeah.
Or if you're Sauron, you're trying to either stop Frodo or get 4 pieces into the Shire, right? And so it's very basic, very easy, and there's, again, meaningful decision making, but the mechanics are forgiving enough that a young child can play it on their own and still win fair and square, right? So, and there's no dice rolling. It's all like, how well do you bluff? How well do you think ahead about which piece your opponent might put where?
Yeah.
But, again, it's like for those of us who are old enough to remember Stratego, where you've got a whole army set up, right? It's much, much cleaner and easier.
Yeah.
I will say, though, that children do like to set up the armies, even if they don't want to play by the rules.
True facts.
Hint for your packaging: put your playtime and number of players and age range on the side of the box, so I don't have to turn it upside down to figure out. It's not on there. It's only.
They kind of tuck it in over here, but it should be much more.
That just says for 2 players.
For 2 players.
That doesn't tell me anything about playtime or age range. That's all here on this tiny thing.
Yeah,
and that's the only place it is. That it's not on the side.
I didn't bring it, but we have
top.
one game that you open up and the rules are right here, and that's kind of helpful, because then as we get rid of pieces, we can put them back in the box, because we also have a rule in our family that we have to count the pieces and make sure that they're all there before the box goes away. So, make sure that it's easy, that mom and dad know that there are 40 cards, and there's 10 whatevers. And if you have little fancy things, how hard is it for me to order another lion? Do I have to hunt on eBay and then pay $15 for it, which is probably more than, what I paid for the game? Or is it easy for me to go to your company and buy a $2 lion?
Yeah.
Because the lion is
Yeah. Now, a couple other things with, so components, skins, ways to handle some similar mechanics, right? So, is there anyone here who isn't familiar with Splendor by any chance?
know nothing about
Oh
it.
my
Sorry.
gosh.
Such a good game.
All right. So part of what makes Splendor such a delight, you're like a Renaissance merchant. You're trying to curry the favor of various nobles, and you're trying to build up, this simple number of points. But it's colors, right? Colors of resources. And here, I'm gonna pass these around because these are so sweet. And this is one of the things that gets people into the game. Max, if you would be so kind as to, so you feel the heft of these pieces,
Yep.
right? And it's like that little extra investment in the quality of the components.
Yep.
It draws the kids in. It makes me feel like I feel a little bit rich. It's
Yeah.
like, look at my little pile of resource chips.
Yeah, I mean, this is good even for games made for adults. Just having high quality components that feel good to handle tactily.
Yeah.
There's a reason why I think it's one of the reasons why Catan did so well in the market. I mean, it's a good game, but it also gives you all these little pieces to fiddle with, and that's the very first thing people do when you dump all these little pieces. I'm just going to build a statue out of all my little wooden roads.
Yes.
While I'm listening to the rules, it gives me something to do when it's not my turn. It gives my fingers something to keep me busy,
And that
helps.
is something everyone does in Catan. I mean, I still do it, and I don't know why.
Right.
So it's right. You're collecting resources that are just 5 different colors of gemstones. Gold is a wild card, and I'm trying to build up a hand of resources so that I can get these nobles and earn victory points. So very basic math. My 9-year-old has no problem holding a seat at the table. It's listed as 14 and up, I think.
Is it?
No.
No,
10 and up.
10 and up.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
You could totally go less.
So another game, and this one is newer, but Century. So this was skinned originally as Century Spice Road, right? So it's Eurocentric merchants going to exotic places and collecting spices. Now, what they've done here is they've taken Century Golem Edition and they've created a complete fantasy world, right? So there isn't any cultural baggage. The components are nice, quality, clean. It's 4 colors of gems. Each one has its own little carrying case,
Oh, that's
right? And then I've got the different cards.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah, the art is gorgeous. It's like I'm a merchant. I have my little caravan. The caravan has spaces on it. I put the gems on the spaces. When it's full, right? So it's visual signaling, as we say in the QI business. The art is cute, and it's all about combinations of resources, either cards that let you acquire resources, cards that let you upgrade resources. It's like this color is rank 1, rank 2, rank 3, rank 4, and you're trying to buy these golems, right? It's like, oh, I'm the lumber golem or the snow golem or the aquatic golem. So cute art.
And what age is this for?
I think. Let's look on the side of the box.
8 plus.
Right.
Now, what's interesting about this game is that my 3-year-old would love to take those cards with the little spaces on them and lay them all out
Yep.
and put little gems on them. Like
Yep.
she would sit there for 20 minutes and do that. Has nothing to do with playing the game, but she would consider that Mommy, I want to play this game. And I could sit on the other side and she could hand me pieces, or whatever. She could create her own way of doing this.
Yeah.
And so like she does that a lot. She gets out her dad's really, really complicated games and she just organizes things. Or, we found chess pieces having a ball quite a bit. They're dancing together, Mommy, on the fancy floor. So this is something that you could play with literally play with your older children, but your younger children could engage with it, I guess is a better way to say.
It's easy to, your kids can participate in cleaning up the components, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yep, I just put this thing in here and there, I've done useful. And look at you could speak to the design, right?
Right.
Elegant.
This is the entire rule sheet. There's a couple things I want to point out that I've not seen this game before. I have to get this now. One thing that I'm realizing here that I think is much rarer in a lot of games for kids is we were talking before about mixed age ranges. Like here, I could easily see where you have an older kid that you're actually playing the game with, and a younger kid who's not ready for this game, but you can just give them a handful of gems and a few cards and be like, go over there and play while the rest of us actually have the game. And kids of mixed ages could peacefully coexist with each of them doing a different thing with the game. I think that's really interesting. The other thing I just noticed here, like every rule sheet has like a little paragraph in italics at the beginning that just gives the backstory and flavor text of the world. And
Yep.
I don't know, should I read this?
Sure.
Or it's like, Papa, where do crystal golems come from? The great masters craft them using soul crystals. Oh, but where do soul crystals come from? From all over the world. They're very rare. Legend says that they are the souls of people who died long before the first humans came to Carvania. Well, when I grow up, I am going to be a crystal trader, and so on. So it's like I think that's interesting that like the backstory here is specifically about a kid and their parent talking and having aspirations.
Right.
And that if you've got a kid and a parent playing the game, that kind of leads
And
into
you might
that.
want to think about some other components. So I'm not quite sure that story would be a perfect one for a young child to have a storybook about. But like there are lots of Angelina storybooks. And so we can read a story about Angelina going to dance class,
Right.
and then we can play
the
this
game.
game together.
And-
But I have yet to open up a game and it actually has a storybook in it.
I think there are a few that do have that, and it's definitely. I mean, if you have like a full color storybook, that's going to add considerably to the cost.
It is.
On the
You're
other
right.
hand, you'll also break into that market of parents that are like, oh, I want this thing to be educational. Oh, look, there's a book I can force my kid to read.
For
this
my
is-
student. Yes.
A couple other things to consider. I have 8 years of difference in between my first and my last child, and so games like that, my older two will be really excited and want to play, and my youngest child, does not know how to not be included. And so there will be there's a lot of cases, and this is part of my disappointment as raising kids with 200 board games in a closet that I can't play most of the time because I can't find a way to include the youngest and have the older two play as well. It's she does not understand not being included in the game part. And it's a difficult thing. Another thing is keep in mind when designing components and things like that, keep disabilities in mind as well.
Yeah.
A lot of if you're going to design colored pieces, also make sure they have different shapes. And the reason is you've got people who are colorblind, or people who need to feel things and different shapes are important as well as different colors.
Yeah, and that's true for every game because adults have color blindness too. I totally agree with that. And this is an area where a lot of dexterity and stacking type games fall down. Is that if the whole goal of the game is to build a tower, and your 5 and your 7-year-old are building this tower collaboratively, and then the 2-year-old comes and knocks it all down.
Yes.
That's when the older kids start throwing tantrums, and the younger kids, it's just that's kind of what they do. So unless you built that into the rules itself, I don't think I can think of any games that do that. But it would be a very interesting thing if you had something where you actually had different roles in the game that were suited to different ages.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So there's
that
another
would be
game design challenge for you.
Yeah.
That would be interesting to build the stacking game for the 7-year-olds, and then the 2-year-old monster comes and knocks it all down.
Yeah.
Now what do we do next? Well, we only have a few minutes left, so who has questions? Any last comments from our?
I have one last thing, the
Okay.
pièce de résistance.
All
We've talked
right.
a bit about storytelling, right? So for those of us who may remember the Pick a Path adventure books, this is like a deluxe version of that, near and far, right? So it's on one level, it is a game about gathering resources and going on these maps, right? And there's a
that's
whole
beautiful.
book of different ones. So there's plenty of variety. There are several different ways to play the game. but there's also a series of adventure tokens. And when you hit an adventure token, then you go to a number in a book, and there's a little paragraph of text, and you get to make a choice about what you do, right? And then depending on what strengths your adventuring party has built up, you might have a different probability of success. But my daughter loves having those adventures and going on those stories and hearing about the little things and then being able to choose something. And also, this gives a chance to, when you are designing the story, it gives you a chance to decide what kind of ethical framework you're going to put into your game, right? Is it like, well, this is a strange creature, I should murder it. Or maybe I could try talking to it instead, right? So lots of pieces, and to fully play it as an adult, you can really appreciate all the grand strategy, but for a much younger child, they can enjoy the storytelling, right, and the world, and the beautiful artwork.
And a similar game, not similar, but another game that I'm really excited that one day I'm going to get to play with my kids is there are these Sherlock Holmes games.
Yes. Yeah.
And they are all pick a path stuff. And you've got a map of London, and you get a description of the murder scene, and there is no dice or pieces or anything. It is all, what do we want to do? Where do we want to investigate? You know, and there's like a phone book, and you're like, okay, well, let's call the morgue or whatever, you know, or let's go to the morgue. And then you flip to the book and read the section about what you learn about this particular adventure when you go to the morgue, and it's really kind of fascinating.
I have a 9-month-old, and you're talking about like the storytelling part that really engaged. What's the age that they're actually starting to understand what storytelling and what path and position, like around what age do you actually start seeing that?
It varies widely, and it's a broad range, and it's a very gradual thing too. Because if you, I'm sure you've read lots of storybooks that are aimed at like the 0 to 2 pre-reader type thing. There's not a whole lot of plot there. It's like there's a bunch of farm animals, and we're counting to 10, and then everyone goes to sleep, and that's pretty much the extent of it. And then and then once you get into like the first early readers, the Dr. Seuss things, then it's like, oh, okay, there is a little bit of a story here. It's not very sophisticated, but it's something, and then you kind of get more and more gradual themes. So it's a very gradual progression, and each kid is going to kind of go through this differently.
You do need to think about sort of what you're putting in your game, and I would caution all of you as game designers to think seriously about when and if you include violence in your game. So this idea of, do we murder the whatever?
This game, it tends much more toward exploration and curiosity. And while, from a game mechanic perspective, you might get some kind of reward for taking a less ethical course of action, you're also going to lose reputation points, which means right. So it's a teachable moment.
Yeah, and so we do need to, we have to teach, how and when and not to hit and those sorts of things, but also how to express anger at the same time. So, there's some real challenges as parents because, your 3-year-old wants to hit and they want to bite, but you have to sort of say, if you'd like to hit something, you have to hit a pillow because we don't hit people and animals. But at the same time, we're also at some point going to have to say, okay, now let's talk about how to defend yourself and when do you defend yourself. And so there's a lot of sort of ethical challenges as being a parent. But you also want to think about things that we have a friend that comes to play this game, and I have to take this piece out of it. It's a clown. I don't know why this small child thinks that this is the most gruesome thing she's ever seen, but something, has happened in her world where she does not like clowns, and we have to take it away. So think about, if you, I don't think there's anything wrong with making something scary, but make sure that it's appropriately scary for that age.
Right.
That makes any sense.
Again, comes down to testing with your target audience. I'll also add to that accept now that when you start testing your game with young kids, your game will make some kids cry, and you will feel like an awful human being. Just emotionally prepare yourself. This is part of the process, and you're not a bad person. You're just a bad designer for kids games when you start out. And we get there through iteration, just like with adult games. I mean, the first iteration of any game is going to suck. And in the case of children's games, you're going to get very different reactions. The other thing, though, is that like young kids, they don't have these filters on them that we have as adults, which means you will get brutally honest feedback. Like, kids are the best playtesters ever. Like, they will not be nice. And so you can iterate a lot faster with a young children's game than you can with like an adult game. So that part is really awesome.
But you also have to make sure that their child's feedback is what I'll call valid feedback. Like my daughter we were playing some game or doing some puzzle, and she said, "Mom, this is boring." And I said, "What does boring mean, Sage?" "I don't know." I mean, like, she really didn't. I was like,
Right.
"I don't think you know that word," And so we had to talk about what boring really means. So make sure that your child that play tests is providing you with real feedback.
Yeah,
I mean, like, it may be boring to a child, but make sure that child, knows the word that they're telling you. A small child will walk away from something that's boring. Like, it just won't engage them. And you may have to look at their behavior more than you look at, their words, depending on.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, observe. I mean, we do this with adults too, and in fact, it's very important when playtesting with adults to observe behavior, because a lot of times we are a little too nice. Oh yes, that was a really wonderful time. I love this game. You are such a good designer. This was wonderful because you're my friend and I don't want to hurt your feelings. And you're like, look, I saw you during the entire game. You were totally checked out. You were leaning back. You were checking your phone every 5 seconds. This game is boring as hell to you, and you're just too nice to tell me. You have to observe your players. In the case of little kids, they're much easier to read in a lot of ways, but a lot more random.
And I want to mention 2 other games just because I think they're interesting experiences. All of my children latched onto Little Big Planet, and in the sandbox mode. Mm-hmm. And what it had was some basic mechanics for how things worked in that sandbox, and they got to go and pick things and put it in there and then mess around with it. My 5-year-old is making Super Mario levels on Mario Maker right now. Nice. These sandbox type things where people can put stuff into a video game is very, very appealing. My kids also love Drop Mix, which I've been playing every night with all the drunk people, kids and drunks.
Yep.
And what they love there, they don't know the songs. They don't know any of the songs, but they like being able to change the music, by putting cards on it. And it's a completely different experience. Definitely something worth checking out for kids. Now, my youngest can't read, so she can't even see the bands that are on the cards, but she can put things down and be fascinated by how the music changes based on what she put down. And I think these kind of sandbox experiences are really good. The hand-eye coordination my youngest has developed from doing Little Big Planet is just amazing. Like, she's incredible with a controller, and it's just because of the sandbox on Little Big Planet.
Right. And it gets back to that core principle of meaningful decision-making that has an observable result.
Yes.
Right? It's like that's what engages adult players. And it also, of course, it also works well for kids.
Well, I'd like to thank Stephen, Ian, Wes for being here, and thank you guys